The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it here, receive and uphold it, vow to fathom it of its true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Today we will begin our class on the Dzogchen teaching, the wish-fulfilling treasury. It can be considered as part of the Dzogchen teaching. In the previous classes, we have already covered 8 chapters. Today, we will begin our class on disassociation from the evil companions. In this chapter, Mipa Rinpoche's textual outline gives a teaching on parting with the negative influence, that is the evil companions. And then, in general, it has 2 aspects. Previously, we have already talked about how one should associate oneself with a virtuous spiritual teacher. And then this chapter talks about how one should disassociate with the evil companions. It has 2 aspects. One is the brief explanation and then extensive. In the brief, it talks about how one should carefully rely on the spiritual teacher that is virtuous and then give up on the evil companion and the kinds of bad influence. In our previous chapter, we have already talked about the merits of relying on a virtuous spiritual teacher. We talked about the characteristics of a qualified teacher, and then we talked about the reason of relying on such a teacher. Now, we're going to talk about how we should also abandon or disassociate with the kinds of evil influence or evil companions or bad and negative companions. Those kinds of bad companions may seem to be that, well, they appear to be like qualified teachers sometimes, but their mind stream are rather quite inferior. So we need to avoid to associate to such kinds of negative influence because we know that the light and dark are completely contradictory to each other. Similarly, the virtuous teacher versus the vice teacher are also contradictory. Therefore, we need to try our best to disassociate ourselves from those evil companions. As a Mahayana practitioner, some of you probably think that, well, even those negative influence and those kinds of evil companions, they're still sentient beings. As Mahayana practitioners, we should not give up on sentient beings. But over here, Omniscient Longchenpa stated that also according to the sutras and the tantras, we need to understand that we have to keep certain distance and we have to be able to balance how we need to proceed the path while not giving up on sentient beings. If we were to get very close and affiliate ourselves with those evil influence, then your practice in this lifetime will not be able to progress along the path. So this is quite important. According to the Sutra of Right Mindfulness, it says that for the reason that we're close to virtuous spiritual friends, we will be able to gain great benefits of merits. And if we were to be affiliated with the vice companions, then we would also be influenced with a great deal of faults. Also, according to the Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that for those kinds of practitioners who longs to seek for virtuous roots, then one has to rely on virtuous spiritual teacher. And we should try our very best not to be affiliated affiliated with the negative companions. Why is that? It is because if you were to rely on the evil companions, they would definitely make obscurations on your path to the virtuous deeds. What is a vice or evil companion? It is to say that whenever you are affiliated with that person, your negative deeds and all of those negative emotions would arouse. You can make observation with the people surrounding you, let it be your teachers or your friends. Some of them may appear to be charlatans, and some of them may appear to be very appropriate, but their minds and their mind stream are very inferior. The people that you associate yourself with, some of them could increase your negative deeds and stop you from engaging in virtuous practice. Those kinds of people can be called the vice companions or the evil companions. Some people may appear to be good friends and good teacher and good companion, but after spending a period of time with them, you would be able to see that you appear to have wasted lots of time when you're with them, or your virtuous roots would be destroyed. Those renunciation and bodhicitta, as well as the non-dual wisdom, not only there's no progress in those areas, you have retrogressions from those. In such a way, those kinds of people that you affiliate with can be called the evil companions. Some of them may have a certain stature, and some of them may appear to have a good heartedness and those kinds of actions, but all of those actions could result in the virtuous roots decreasing your mind, and for those kinds of people, we can call them as the evil companions. In the more extensive explanation of why we should disassociate with those evil companions, there are three aspects. Firstly, we're going to discuss the qualities of a vice companion. What are the kinds of characteristics? What are the qualities? Would I be able to see through those? Would I be able to distinguish the qualities? There are people who tend to show affection and care to us. But what's the nature of those kinds of people? Let it be the monastics or the lay practitioners. We should still be able to see through those, and we should still be able to see the true characters. Since the vice companions may have different kinds of statures. For example, some may be lay practitioners, some may be monastics, some may be even the teachers and the Sangha members, and some may not have any belief. Out of all those people around us, we need to learn how to make choices. We need to make we need to have discernment. There are people who can make progress on their path of practice because of their merits. Also, because they know how to make choices at the beginning. They know how to find a virtuous spiritual teacher, and then throughout the process of engaging in practice, they know how to disassociate themselves from those vice companions and evil friends. Therefore, the mind stream of such kind of practitioner can be nurtured and can be protected, just like the growth of a tree. At the time when the tree is still young, there needs to be all kinds of protections so that the tree can be nurtured and can be protected to grow to be stronger. Similarly, the practitioners also needs to eradicate all kinds of obscurations and obstacles and cultivate favorable conditions. Now I would like to share a photo of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Yesterday I mentioned that Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche has rather a very special attire. Can you see that? He has lots of those Z beads, and those Z beads are the genuine ones. The one in the middle that he's wearing right now is a small statue of Manjushri, which was used by Mipa Rinpoche. And his ring was given by one of his lama and means a lot to him, so he wears it very often. He wears it always. I would like to simply introduce this photo of Gyalgo Khyentse Rinpoche so that you would be able to take a moment of relaxation and then focus on the class again. I think it would be quite helpful. Now let us continue to look at the text. In the verse, we're going to look at the characteristics and qualities of a vile companion. It says, inferior mind fused with coarse and ferocious afflictions, seeking after only this life without renunciation, ignorant and ill-informed, without faith, diligence, nor merits. We can look at all of them together or separately. But let's look at the characters over here. With your observation, you would be able to see whomsoever has those qualities, let it be your teacher, your friends, or the people around you. Those are the kinds of characteristics that we can identify as the vile companions. Since they're the companions, they don't really appear in your life as your enemies. They would rather appear to be very caring towards you. In such a way, you will slowly develop the 100% trust. And then with time, you would be lured away by such kind of non-virtuous company. Those kinds of vile companions may appear to be the kind of people that treats you really well and even develop very close relationship with you. But that group of people tend to lure you into the wrong path. Even in the worldly sense, the worldly people would be lured away or be manipulated by their close friends rather than enemies. Because enemies, at the time of appearing as your enemy, you will have a sense of prevention that, oh, I don't want to get close to that person. But when you feel that this is a spiritual teacher, this is a good friend to me, and this person treats me better than he cares about him or herself, in such a way, you will get, and if this person were to be a non-virtuous, unwholesome friend, then slowly and slowly your own merit would be tinted with those unwholesome qualities from this unwholesome friend. Because this particular person, if he or she has lots of those three poisons and jealousy and arrogance and the 6 root afflictions, with those ferocious afflictions in their mind stream, then you would be tinted by those kinds of afflictions as well in your mind stream. Those kinds of unwholesome qualities cannot be seen through their appearances, but whenever you see someone who has those ferocious characteristics and heavy afflictions, those are considered as the kinds of people with the unworthy qualities in their mind stream. Also, there are people who would only seek for this lifetime's wealth and stature and all the 8 worldly dharmas without any renunciation whatsoever, rather seeking only for fame and wealth and all kinds of benefits. These are also kinds of qualities of the unwholesome companion. We can see that there are the kinds of people who, not seeking for any kinds of knowledge of the Sutrayana and the Vajrayana, they are rather very shallow and very ignorant. Whatever they would do and the choices they make are about to bring suffering upon themselves and others. On top of that, they do not have any faith or diligence friends. They do not have any faith to the qualified teachers and not diligent towards those Dharma teachings that would lead onto the path of liberation. Rather, they're quite lazy. For such a reason, in their mind stream, they are so far away from all kinds of virtuous qualities and virtuous provisions. These kinds of foolish ones are not worthy friends. According to the Dhammapada Sutra, it says that one would rather be virtuous alone than to be accompanied with the foolish ones. If we were to be friends with the foolish ones, then slowly and slowly we'll also become like them. There are really wonderful people at the beginning. At the beginning, maybe they enjoy studying contemplation and practice in each of those aspects. They're quite excellent. But once they meet an unwholesome friend, the more they are affiliated with such kind of friend, the worse they would get. Slowly and slowly, their temper would get more harsh, and they would get more afflictions and would lose their mind of renunciation. In such a way, even a good person would become a foolish person as well. Now, the next characters includes untamed three gates, arrogant and manipulative, slandering, do not have any pure perception, respect, or faith, greedy for food and wealth, full of erroneous ideas, breaking vows and precepts with the disturbed minds. The qualities for the vile friends are quite many. The first and foremost is that there are three gates. The body, speech, and mind are not gentle, are not tamed. Their speech and their body and the way they carry out their walk, we can see that they're not tamed. The other day, I saw a group of monks standing over here. It seems that the way they talk and the way they carry out their behavior are rather quite harsh. If a person within a large sangha were to carry out those kinds of harsh and inappropriate actions within a large group, then you can imagine how that person would be when he is on his own. I am not saying that everyone would be perfect like the Ashvajit, the Ashvajit bhikshu. It's very difficult for us to have the perfect conduct and perfect precepts. But after we have already received the vows and observed the precepts, especially after wearing the robes, then our speech and the way we walk, the way we talk, and the way our mindset should be very peaceful. We shouldn't be flooded with all kinds of afflictions and suffering. Such kinds of unpeaceful body and speech and mind are called the untamed three gates. On top of that, arrogance is another characteristic. We would often talk about, oh, this person is so arrogant and is so snobbish. Those are not good qualities. Whenever we meet those wonderful, meritorious, great masters, the qualified teachers, they're very humble. They're completely modest. Compared to them, we have no merit in our mind stream. Maybe you have a little bit of youth, maybe a bit of wealth, maybe of a little bit of beautiful appearance or status, but those are nothing to be arrogant about, because those worldly things are nothing worth to be proud of. And if you're proud of those, that's rather quite foolish. Another characteristic of such vile friend is deceptive and manipulative, or sometimes quite pretentious, use all kinds of ways to fool the others. Sometimes those kinds of unworthy friends would also slander and curse the others out of jealousy, speak of others' faults, Also, because of anger and greed, they have no pure perception. Without pure perception, those kinds of people would see everyone as false, as faulty, and they would see everything as wrong, and nothing is good. If a person has a good practice and has a better mindset, then they would be able to spend their day in a rather peaceful way, and they would be able to enjoy such kind of calm and a peaceful life in a day, a year, a month, without any afflictions, without anything negative. But in our mind stream, if we were to be under the influence of greed and anger, then we would perceive this as wrong. That is wrong. We would perceive everything is wrong. Those are the signs of without pure perception. The kinds of unworthy friends also has no faith and no respect towards the guru, towards the three jewels, and has no faith towards the merits, has no faith towards the three jewels. On top of that, they would have lots of greed towards food and towards wealth, without any limit. Also, without any connection to liberation, rather filled with erroneous ideas, the erroneous view, erroneous knowledge, erroneous actions. There are the kind of people who are probably more rich in resource for the erroneous ways. It seems that they're filled with those opportunities to practice the erroneous ways. Compared to their rich resource in erroneous ways, they're quite poor in the correct way and the right dharma. To give you an example, it's just like someone who is very wealthy and has abundant of gold and silver and all kinds of jewels. On the other hand, if a person who is really poor has no treasure whatsoever, but has abundant rubbish. So similarly, there are the kinds of people who are quite wealthy with the right dharma, and there are kinds of people whom are filled with the erroneous knowledge and erroneous views and the wrong actions. Whatever kinds of things that they would perceive are erroneous, are vile, and they are not necessarily perceive others correctly. They're quite ignorant to themselves without even knowing that they are full of erroneous views. By spending time together, one would be led into the erroneous way to increase the non-virtue and decrease all kinds of wonderful virtue. Those are the characteristics of the vile companions and the negative friends. This part of the printing has an error. There's a little bit of a printing issue in the Chinese version that should be corrected. And then the verse continues to say that breaking the vows and precepts disturb one's own mind. Entering into the wrong and confused path, increase the non-virtue but decrease the wondrous virtue. Those are the characteristics of the vile companion and the negative friends. This is the verse over here. It means that these are the characteristics of the vile friends, which is because of associating with the vile friends, one would slowly lose the mind of knowing what is shameful. Without knowing one's own principle and limitations, without knowing what is shameful, then it is not possible to work with one's own conflictions. For such reason, one would break the pratimoksha vow in one's mind stream, as well as the bodhisattva vow, and sometimes even the samaya vow of the Vajrayana. And then, because one would break the vows and precepts, it naturally would disturb one's own mind. People nowadays seems to have lots of disturbed mind. Some would get all kinds of mental illness because of it. For example, depression, anxiety, and sometimes they're just not even mental illness yet, but there are subhealth. In such kinds of subhealth status, maybe one's mindset would be quite abnormal as well. You'll be happy one day, and the other day would be quite upset for no reason. So those are the signs of disturbed mindset and disturbed mind, because one's mind is not gentle, is not tamed enough, because there is no practice of patience, and because one would not be able to work with those kinds of disturbed mind yet. Whenever we look at some of the people, it seems that they can have a wide range of fluctuation in their mindset, sometimes extremely happy and sometimes extremely upset. I would like to specifically address something to our Khenpos and Khenmos. I would suggest you not to be like the worldly teachers that brings their personal feelings and personal agendas into the classroom. For example, if one were to just had a breakup yesterday, and then the second day the worldly teacher would enter into the classroom with all the negative feelings and start to vent those negative feelings to the students. That had happened to a female teacher whom probably had some conflicts and talked on the phone for a long time and started crying out loud, and then running to the classroom and got a large stick and started to beat all the students in the classroom, and then cried out loud and then ran out. Those are signs of how a person's mind is truly disturbed. Also, if you were to spend a long time with those kinds of people, then you would be tinted with those kinds of afflictions. And then some people would even set steps into the wrong ways, or the erroneous ways. After getting along with those vile friends, some monastics would set their steps onto the wrong path, and some would engage in the wrong practice or give up their monastic precepts and then get derobed. All of those kinds of things can be led by a vile companion. Something I said once found out by Phuntsok Rinpoche, and he scolded me for that. I don't know if I can speak of it. Anyhow, the thing was that I told a person not to associate himself with so-and-so. And then when Phuntsok Rinpoche heard of it, he said that maybe this new monastic that you're protecting is of an even worse monastic. It's probably more untamed than the others that you mentioned. Later, the new monastic I was giving the advice to had derobed, but those people I thought were quite untamed continued to be monastics and became better practitioners. Phuntsok Rinpoche at that time said that, well, the person you give the advice to should be considered as a vile companion. At that time, I had all the good intentions because he is a new monastic, he's newly ordained. So I give him the advice not to associate himself with those not so gentle monastics. So I think whenever it comes to the kinds of disciples that Khenpos and Khenmos would show special care, they would definitely give them advice by telling them, oh, it would be better to not associate with so-and-so. Because we can notice that if one person were to associate him or herself with those vile friends, slowly, after spending some time with them, they would lose the hearts in study, contemplation, and practice. Nowadays, we have too many people, but in the past, I used to give requirement to the Khenpos and Khenmos saying that it would be better for you not to spend too much time with so-and-so. In fact, we can make observations. So we can see that if a person, after spending some time with that person, whether your afflictions would be increasing or decreasing. And people are very observant. Each and every one of them surrounding you, though appear to have a good relationship with you, they are observing you at all times. Maybe they don't make praises to you all the time when you're doing good things, but whenever you're making a mistake, they would definitely notice it. Anyhow, we should be careful not to set our steps into the wrong path, because in such a way, if we were to increase the unwholesome deeds, then slowly we would be under the control of the vice and the negative force, which then slowly bring about great amount of the unfortunate incidents, and then it would decrease your meritorious qualities. Some of the sutras and shastras would say that the vile companions are just like a poisonous spider. If it were to be falling into the milk, then the whole pot of milk will become poisonous as well. So if one vile friend is mixed within the large community, then such kind of vile friend would infect lots of others within this community. There is another saying in Tibet. We say that to pull one up, it needs 100 people. But to pull one person down just needs one person, because the force of pulling up is rather very weak, and it's very difficult to pull someone up, which is to say very difficult for people to encourage you to accumulate virtuous deeds. But it's easy for you to it's easy to be pulled down, as it is easy to encourage you and influence you to become selfish and to give up all of those virtuous qualities. So we should try our very best to part from those vile companions. And in order to part from them, we have to know the characteristics of those vile companions. Whenever you give advice to others saying that, oh, it's better for you not to associate yourself with a negative friend. And then people may ask you, what is a negative friend? What is a vile companion? Could you tell me some? And then you can expound these few dozens of characteristics that's been expounded by Longchenpa. Even if not all of them, if one or few of those are the characteristics, for example, someone who's very greedy for wealth, or someone who has lots of afflictions, or someone who would influence you to give up your vows and break your precepts, all of those people can be considered as the negative friends. So it's better for you not to associate with those people. Of course, I understand that birds of a feather flock together, but whenever we notice that in this flock there is one person that is rather of a negative influence, then you should try your best to cut that kind of affiliation with a negative friend. Maybe now you're thinking that, oh, but we're Mahayana practitioners, I shouldn't abandon the sentient beings. Isn't that breaking of the vow, of the precept of Bodhisattva vow? But according to Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, it says that though with great compassion and kindness, we should not be together with such kind of negative friend. In order to protect your own practice, there is no need to spend time and to affiliate with a person who is considered as a negative influence. Though that we should have kindness and compassion to that person. According to the precepts, the Vinaya teachings, it also says that those people who had broken the vows should not stay with the Sangha, should not be together with the whole Sangha community. In Vajrayana, it is said that for people who had broken their vows, their Samaya vows, we should not even drink the water from the same valley with that person. The most compassionate person is Shakyamuni Buddha, is the Vajradhara, but they cannot do anything with the kind of people who had broken their vows. Sometimes you have the right intention, wanting to help them out, but by affiliating yourself with them, you may be led onto the wrong path as well, and being influenced into the way that you would completely regret. According to the Iko-agama Sutra, it says that there is no vice of the nature of a person, rather it is because one would affiliate with the vile friends, which will plant the vile roots and lead to the forever abiding in the darkness and ignorance. The nature of human beings are kind. It is not vile. But it is in the later part when we affiliate ourselves with the vile companions and those negative influence, which then would implant those vile roots. And those kinds of vile roots would lead us to spend our life and spend those time in darkness. We see so many examples of how there are people at the beginning, they're very kind, but slowly become a vile person, like robbers and thieves and so on and so forth. Because the nature of human beings, the nature of all beings are Talagaragarba, it is of the nature of kindness and of good. But later, because of all kinds of environment and all kinds of luring of the vile friends, then people started to benefit themselves and harm of the others. So first of all, we need to know the characteristics of the vile friends, the negative companions. And then the next textual outline talks about why we should part from them, which then also includes two parts. The first one is the faults, and the second one is the teaching on parting from them. So let's look at the faults. Over here, it says that there are infinite faults associated with getting together with vile friends. Inferior mind stream, decrease of pure perception, partiality, arrogance, self-centeredness, praising oneself, harming others, and giving up on the correct dharma, as well as slandering all the qualified Mahayana teachers. Over here it says that we should part from those vile friends, those negative influence. It is just like Like if we were to stay right next to a pile of feces, then naturally you will get the stink from it. Though that you're not truly entered into it, but those kinds of stink and foul smells would permeate around you. Similarly, if we were to rely on some negative influence, then the kinds of negative influence could last for lifetimes and could be quite infinite. This is just a natural law. I'm sure during your years in school, the teacher would constantly tell you that it would be better for you to to be friends with people who are good at study and who are kind. So this is just a natural law. It happens everywhere. Whomsoever we affiliate ourselves with could implement great influence upon us. There are the kinds of people maybe appears to be your acharya or your friends or your family and friends. If you were to rely on a person without pure perception, pure mind, without faith, without diligence, rather a person who is very self-cherishing and self-centered, then our mind stream would slowly be influenced towards that direction as well. For example, if you were to affiliate with someone who has a bad temper, then your temper will also get worse and worse day by day. And a person without pure perception and pure mind, then slowly your mind and your way of looking at life would also decrease in purity. Sometimes pure perception or renunciation, all of those kinds of qualities of the teachers, the qualified teachers, if we can gain some of those qualities into our mind, that would be really wonderful. Do not just become a bookworm and only study the theories, but not merge the Dharma into your own mind. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how many years you would study, your mind stream would not change a bit. But whenever we look at the great teachers, they have such pure perception. They would not look at others' faults. They would perceive everyone as Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and everywhere as the Pure Lands. If you remember, at the time of listening to the Dharma, we're supposed to have this pure perception of viewing the five purities, the place, the time, and the people around you, and the teacher. So we're supposed to see this shrine hall as the Pure Land of Amitabha or as Padmasambhava, so that our mind stream can be pure. Maybe because of the teacher that you rely on doesn't make you feel so pure, or maybe because yourself has not developed this pure perception, or maybe because we're living in this dark age. It is rather very different than during the time of the Foundation, where whenever people would listen to the Dharma teaching, they would be able to attain liberation right away or attainment right away. It seems that nowadays, it doesn't matter how long we study the Dharma, it seems that our mind stream doesn't change much, which is quite a pity. Within the same period of time and in front of the same teacher, listening to the same Dharma, and listening with the same methods of listening to the Dharma, but some people may receive infinite benefit, and some people, not only they do not gain any benefit from the Dharma teaching, they could get even worse from it. You should really ask your own mind, your own heart, about why that is so. When we listen to the teachings from Ponsogo Rinpoche, we used to feel so happy and so joyful that now we have encountered such profound Dharma teachings. And then sometimes I do feel that, oh, maybe my mind stream is not as pure as when I first came here. My renunciation and bodhicitta and so on has now declined, and I am such a jaded practitioner. So there is such kinds of fluctuation in our perception. But I would like to emphasize that if we were to affiliate ourselves with the vile friends, we can definitely see that our pure perception would decrease, and our partiality would increase. At the same time, there's the arising of the arrogance, self-centeredness, thinking that I am perfect, I am all right, everyone else is not as good as me, and started to speak of those frivolous language that would be able to manipulate other people's minds, which would tint the others with all kinds of faults as well. Also, praising oneself and harm the others, though one is not of any great merits, but whenever it comes to oneself or the kinds of family and friends that's affiliated with oneself, especially when there are connections to benefits and to profits, then one would praise all the way. But whenever it comes to the other people, one would slander without any limits. On top of that, the vice friends would ask us to abandon the correct dharma that would lead us to liberation, and most importantly, would constantly slander the spiritual teacher of the Mahayana, and especially the kinds of spiritual teacher that would benefit the sentient beings. That is indeed quite horrid. We need to part from those kinds of friends. On top of that, there are more faults, such as have greed towards wealth, also shooting out the poisonous errors of greed, anger, and then only seek for this lifetime, but parting from the path of liberation, to decrease of all the virtues and increase of the non-virtues. The kinds of vile companions would increase your grasping towards wealth, as well as all kinds of enjoyments of this lifetime. Those people with negative influence, especially if the negative influence were to be someone with great power, look at those old men and women on the world stage, kept on shooting out the arrows of greed and anger, and disturbs the mind of the people of the whole world, which is quite pitiful. When we look at people with so much greed and anger and so on, if you were to rely on those kinds of negative influence, then how could you attain liberation? Also, if you were to be only prisoned by the chores of samsara and of this lifetime, which would only part you from the path of liberation, because you're constantly being influenced by the self-centeredness as well as the afflictions associated with it. So how could you step onto the path of the three liberations? You would definitely not be interested in that. Now, because of those severe desire, anger, and ignorance, the merits would slowly be distinguished and cannot further be nurtured and increased anymore, but the three poisons would. According to the Vinaya Sutra, it says that the rotten fish being tethered by the kusha grass, the grass of auspiciousness, it doesn't take long for the kusha grass to be also rotten. So that is a verse to point to relying on a vice friend. Also, in the Vinaya Sutra, it has a story that's associated with this particular verse. It was because the Buddha once noticed that Ananda constantly would hang out with the 6 groups of bhikshus that do not listen to the Buddha. And they would talk about all kinds of ways of having a livelihood through the wrong ways. And then after the Buddha knowing it, the Buddha said that, well, if you were to be affiliated with these group of people, then I would like to give you an example. So he led Ananda to the city, and there is a merchant who's selling fish, and all of those fish were laid on top of the kusha grass. The Buddha told Ananda, saying that, look at the kusha grass. Could you put the could you put your hand onto the kusha grass? And then Buddha asked Ananda, saying that, could you smell your hand right now? And then Ananda smelled his hand, saying that this stinks. He said, I simply touched the grass that laid underneath the fish, and my hand stinks. And then the Buddha told Ananda, saying that to rely on a vile friend is much more vile than touching those stinky grass. It is because after relying on a vile friend, you will be infamous and you will be tainted with all kinds of afflictions and bad habitual tendencies. So the Buddha gave such a verse to give teaching to Ananda, saying that the rotten fish in front of the people are tethered up by this kusha grass, but after a period of time, this kusha grass, which is supposed to be auspicious, is now tinted by the rotten fish, so it becomes quite stinky as well. If we were, for the same reason, if we were to rely on a negative friend, then after a period of time, we ourselves would also get such kind of foul from that friend. In the praise of merits and meritorious qualities, it says that if one were to put a piece of regular wood inside of the forest of the Malaya tree forest, then the fragrance of the Malaya tree would naturally influence this ordinary wood, which would make this wood also fragrant. Similarly, if you rely on a person who is meritorious, then you would become meritorious. If you were to rely on a person with ignorance, then you would become more ignorant. And if you were to rely on a person with aggression, then you would also become aggressive. The students I sponsored, after they graduated and then started to engage in worldly works, I noticed that some of those people would be very much influenced by their career and the kinds of people that they work with. I once encountered this particular student. He was staring at me with this angry gaze, and I asked him, "Why are you gazing at me with such anger?" He then apologized, saying, "I am so sorry, I didn't intend to, but it's just my habitual tendency that I got from my work." So we can see that whatever kinds of environment and whatever kind of people we surround ourselves with would definitely influence us. In the commentary of the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, there's also the elaboration on the negative influence of a vile friend, how there are lots of negative and obscurations that could be imposed upon the practitioners from a negative friend, and how there are negative influences from the other sex and from a variety of people. So we had already talked about that. Now we should stop here today.